Good evening. Thank you. You want me? Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm told my presentation follows on from Ramana's, but you're going to see an engineer's presentation now rather than an architect's. It's going to be really boring. But I hope I can keep you awake for just a few minutes. So, yeah, that was Ramana's slide. I changed it round, or she changed it round actually because I copied it from her. But you can see there are two levels, okay? Government policies and plans. They need to link with, connect to community-based disaster risk reduction. Communities have been living with disasters for years. So you've seen Thailand. We know other countries around the world where all sorts of disasters happen. People have been living with them for years. But it's only sort of as governments have grown and become formal, etc., that the government responsibilities have come in. So, as you can see, yes, people continue to adapt, but the role of the government is something. So we'll try and explore that a little bit over the next few minutes. And Ramana talked about frameworks. This is the current one that is coming from the UN, the Sendai framework. And it says there, the second bullet down, the state has a primary role to play to reduce disaster risk. Okay, so it's saying we can't just leave communities as they are. So the state's got to have a role. So how are they responding to that? And you can see there, particularly local government, and we heard that from Ramana as well. Local government is the closest that it gets to the people, and it feels their situation and it knows their situation, but it does face challenges because local government is highly dependent upon national policies, national funding, and those sorts of things. So their ability to respond is often compromised by the national situation. And then you've got that very long thing. This is what the Sendai framework aims for. So it's reduction of disaster risks, losses in lives, etc., etc. And it covers a whole lot of assets. I mean, we saw how in Thailand people have built floating houses. So they're protecting their assets there. But we saw also how the local government was flooded out and their assets were lost. So we need to think it's not just people, not just lives. We're talking about livelihoods. We're talking about the challenges that organisations face. You know, we can deliver water to people. I primarily work in water and sanitation. But we're looking at whether we're delivering in a way that improves and protects their quality of life. Okay, so I'm going to focus on Bangladesh. And Ramana's really interested because that's where she comes from, but she doesn't know anything about the country. Anyway, Thailand, similar situation in many ways. Okay, Bangladesh faces a perfect storm. Climate change is causing sea level rise, 200 to 400 millimeters in the next 50 years. Climate change is also increasing the intensity of cyclones. And I've been interested in how things have been happening in the Caribbean this year. Okay, not necessarily an increase in number, but an increase in the intensity and the strength. And we've seen that certainly in the Caribbean, and we've even seen it with Brian, was it? Whoever. I can't remember, the one that hit Ireland just the other day. So we're getting increased wind speeds. So that's driving water. And it's obviously affecting other parts of infrastructure. You know, roofs are getting blown off and power lines are being blown down and these sorts of things. More intense storms mean lower atmospheric pressure. So the water is rising because of the reduced atmospheric pressure, and then because of the wind, it's getting blown. Okay, and we're getting more intense rainfall in those events too. So very difficult situation, very difficult. Because we're getting wetter monsoons, there's more water coming down the rivers, and in Bangladesh it is primarily from India, from the Ganges, and the Brahmaputra, which is coming from the northern side of the Himalaya, and then down through the eastern part of India. So there's more water coming through in the monsoon period, and there's been a very intense program in Bangladesh over recent years to build embankments around land, so rivers are being confined, so there's less space for the rivers to flow through, the water to flow through. So again, water levels are rising. Okay, and added to that, because these embankments have been created, land that used to be flooded annually, and the silt that was in the rivers would settle, so the land would rise. Because that's not happening now, or not happening to the same extent, there's no replenishment of soil, and as the land, or as time goes by, the soil consolidates, so the level of the land is falling. So we've got more water up, we've got more water coming down, and we've got land going down, falling. You know, it's a disaster. It is a disaster risk. So how do you respond to that? And I was going to go into lots and lots of words, but we've had too many words. So I'm going to show you that picture here. These are 3 towns in the coastal region of Bangladesh. And we had a project that was to improve urban infrastructure, and that had to have a disaster risk component in it. So roads that were being built had to be resilient for the next 50 years in terms of water level rise. Okay, cyclone shelters were being built and other things. And I was responsible with some Bangladeshis for flood and drainage, which in a country like Bangladesh is it's like drinking a poison chalice, because we've seen that list of things there, and the country's flat. So trying to create drainage in a flat area which is facing these other risks is, in a sense, hiding to nothing. Now, the benchmark at the moment is Cyclone Sidra, which happened in 2007. That's the most severe storm that Bangladesh has faced for a number of years, and it's the most recent one. It was 2000, so that's 10 years ago. And what we tried to do was just assess what the impacts were going to be in these towns from another Sidra-like event. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm going to start with this one here, okay? Am I in the way of everybody? The town is in this particular area here, and people in Bangladesh are not silly, so they've built on the highest land that's available. And when you're talking about the highest land, you're probably talking about that much higher than everywhere else. It's not totally true. And we did a little survey, and we asked people, well, how deep was the water at that particular time, and how long was it that deep? And although it's green, I mean, that's positive. Actually, that's 0 to 25 centimetres submergence for a period of about an hour or 1 or 2 hours, okay? and we go through the scale. So this area particularly suffered for more severe inundation and for longer. Okay, but also there's a navigable channel coming through here from two branches of the Brahmaputra river and the delta area. So boats are coming through here carrying goods to and from the town. There's an embankment along the river here and here, and there are a number of small rivers or drains that are passing through the town into this channel here, or going directly into the main river channel. So you can see that large parts of that area are submerged by flooding at some time. This is a similar one in another town. This one is in the middle of a polder area, but there are drainage channels, main drainage channel that's coming through here, and then there is drainage from the rural areas, which we've not mapped because we were working on an open project, so our interest stops at the boundary. That's not true, but thinking of a lot of people stops at the boundary. And then water is coming through. So in this case, the light brown colour, depth, inundation depth of 1 metre to 1.25 metres. And it doesn't show up very well in the projection, but there are times on that as well. So the town is here, and you can see that the town is substantially inundated after a major flood event. And that will be water that's coming from the rural area. That would be water that's being driven in by the cyclone, higher water levels, and the wind driving it through. Okay, and this is another town, and again, the depths here are not so severe. So green is no inundation there. Yellow is 0 to 25 centimetres, and red is more than 25 centimetres. But basically, whether you've got half a metre of water or 20 centimetres of water in your house, if your property is damaged, your bedding, if you've got electrics, etc. Most people have got TVs somehow. Doesn't matter whether it's this much or this much. You've lost your assets, and you can be stopped getting to and from work and these sorts of things. So there's a channel here which is flowing out into the river. But the farmers here want the water from the river to irrigate their land. So the farmers have one interest, the town has another interest. Okay? The same through here. So we proposed sort of building an embankment around the town with some sluices here so that the town could be drained more in advance of the rural area. We failed because all these institutions, they all had conflicting interests. The local government in the rural areas wanted their land to be drained, even though the rural areas are dependent upon the town for a lot of their economy. The Water Development Board, responsible for the embankments, just wants to do its thing. The Roads and Highways Department builds roads that cuts off natural drainage channels. So water is held in areas where it shouldn't be. The Water Transport Authority wants to keep the channels open so that the boats can pass. And then you've got the community groups as well. And then you have another town here where everything seems to be under control, but there are 31 outfalls along this 2.5 kilometre length of the river. Okay? They didn't know that there were 31. They knew there were only they only knew 16. So there are 15 that are left open of water when it rises in the river is coming in to the town. So trying to create something like the Thames Barrier or the Lee River Barrier to create a reservoir in the urban area because there's no topography to speak of. It's all flat. Big challenges. Okay, so we failed on that one. So we have to build in disaster resilience, and I can say they do manage to do it in the Mekong with those 4 countries involved. So maybe there's a question of national capacity. And then in Zimbabwe, here we are. I'm working on a project there that's doing supporting a wash infrastructure by training. So there was decline in the country, cholera, people came in. But if the people haven't got the capacity, if the local government hasn't got the capacity, then the infrastructure is at risk. So developing and delivering training. So there's a mixture of responses and opportunities there. Thank you.